These women are often shunned, looked down upon. They are seen as sinners. They are at times excluded from churches. They deal with shame, vulnerability, loneliness. They're misunderstood. And yet, despite all that they've been through, these women having a fierce determination to get past it all. And a faith, outrageous faith, that simply defies their experience. I'd like to focus on the gospel scripture from Mark today, and beginning with the woman who in faith reached out to touch the hem of Christ's garment to be healed from that 12 years of bleeding. 12 years of suffering physically and emotionally, suffering the exclusion from touch, and suffering from being banished from her temple. And with all of that, I'm not sure which might have been the worst. So if you'll bear with me, I just want to geek out a little bit about the effects of those 12 years, the side effects. So to start, we know that for an infant, caring touch is literally survival. Touch has in fact been shown to calm our nervous centers, to slow our heartbeats. It lowers blood pressure and cortisol, our stress hormone. And the release of the hormone oxytocin is another benefit of physical touch. Oxytocin helps humans form emotional connection, and it also creates sensations that foster a sense of well-being and happiness. Physical touch also increases the levels of dopamine and serotonin, which are two neurotransmitters that help regulate our moods and relieve stress and anxiety. Dopamine also regulates the pleasure center in our brain, and that can offset feelings of anxiety. So just thinking about that, the woman in this scripture has surely been affected through 12 years by the lack of touch. Then if we look at the social support from a network of friends and loved ones, we know that it's important for physical and mental health. It can help people cope with stress, setbacks, and loss. And people with strong social networks tend to have lower levels of stress, they live longer, and they report higher levels of well-being. These are just a few of the things that we find in our place of worship, where this woman was deprived for 12 years. So just one last point, we have a name now for that lack of touch, and it's called touch deprivation. So we've even named it. So let's just think of all these effects on this woman and many others that we, I'm sure, have no idea that she suffered through. Yet, we see in her this incredible faith. And we see the compassion of Jesus, who said to her, or who reached out to her, a woman who was a societal outcast. And I can't help but notice some parallels between this woman and the women that we serve at Generate Hope. These women are often shunned, looked down upon. They are seen as sinners. They are at times excluded from churches. They deal with shame, vulnerability, loneliness. They're misunderstood. And often the only touch in their lives is an unwanted touch. And yet, despite all that they've been through with sex trafficking, I see these women having a fierce determination to get past it all. And a faith that simply defies their experience. If you've ever had that kind of faith, you might well have been through a desperate situation. It often seems that it takes dire straits to get us to that point of such a strong faith. Jesus noted this when he said tenderly to this woman, "Daughter, your faith has healed you." The women that we serve at Generate Hope often have a desire to know Jesus. They sometimes have a growing faith, and even sometimes have an incredible faith. Whatever their level of faith, I'm convinced that God handpicks them for Generate Hope. From there, he positions our staff to support them in the home where we provide for them and in our daily program, which includes an opportunity for them to catch up academically, since the average age of entry is 15 years old. Every woman who has come to us at Generate Hope has PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and they often have other psychological challenges. So our on-staff therapist provides for them individual therapy once a week and up to 5 group therapies every week. And that's to help them heal from the trauma of the sex trade. We also have adjunct therapies like dance, yoga, equine therapy, financial wellness. We have surf therapy going on right now, nutrition, and other classes that are provided by vetted volunteers. In addition, we have community partners who provide care and services such as psychiatry, medical care, dental care, acupuncture, optometry, and so many other services. These are practitioners who care about these women, and they provide these services most of the time with no charge. And most of the women haven't had any of these services for the entire time that they've been trafficked, and sometimes long before that. All of this for young American women or children who've been coerced, tricked, blackmailed into the sex trade, and who couldn't figure a way out. Young women who were taken advantage of, typically by an older male, who played the game before and was very good at it. Women who were then, as our district attorney says, sold like a piece of pizza on the internet. And make no mistake, it's happening in your backyard and across the nation. So we must all do what we can to stop this crime against our children, our grandchildren, our neighbors, our friends. So like the 12-year-old girl, to whom Jesus simply replied, "Get up," we were told, "Get out of the boat." That was after we had spent 2 years planning, researching, training to get ready for Generate Hope. And it was during a sermon, the pastor was preaching about Peter's faith when he stepped out of the boat. And so I suddenly thought, women are being trafficked while we're sitting here training and planning. We need to get out of the boat. So with 3 months rent in the bank, we opened in a small 5-bedroom house. And people came out of the woodwork to help us. We got all the furniture that we needed, all the linens that we needed, and every kitchen item we could think of. And in fact, one of the small miracles, and we see small and huge miracles all along the way, the pillowcases from this donor match the sheets from this donor. And just little things like that, we see God's hand. And big things, believe me, we've seen so many huge miracles. And I often joke that if we had had a board at that time, they never would have let us open. Because what kind of a board would let us open with 3 months rent in the bank, right? But we stepped out on faith because God told us to. This year, we celebrate our 15-year anniversary, which just blows me away. We are amazed with what God has given us, and ultimately, what he's given to the women that we serve, which brings me back to faith. Outrageous faith. Faith when the world would tell us to quit, and they would laugh at us. Faith that moves us to reach out to Jesus, knowing that we will be healed and we will be cared for by a loving God who tenderly calls us daughter or son.